All right, it's time for some big boy Strauss, or big girl Strauss might be more fitting for this one. Ein Heldenleben, it's a trip. I think that there are three immediate problems. First, there's this glut of information. You look at the page and there are so many notes, not only musical notes, but like notes from Strauss, so many expressive markings that he wants you to pay attention to, and it's really freaking long. It's tough to even begin to process all of that information. The second problem is when you go and you listen to this played in an orchestra, there is a complicated interaction between the solo part and the orchestral part. I feel like I should toss out this disclaimer. I'm not concertmaster of Berlin Phil. I'm not some professional or even some hotshot who knows what he's doing. I'm just some dude who learned this excerpt. I really might be totally wrong about everything that I say and do in this video. So when I was preparing this, I came up with a couple different frameworks for thinking about and working on this excerpt. The first is the Pauline character. So if you're not familiar with the origin story of this excerpt, Heldenleben is a very long tone poem, and it includes characters from Strauss's life, including Strauss himself. And this whole excerpt, the violin, represents Pauline, his wife. It doesn't seem necessarily like a very flattering portrait of her at times. Right from the beginning, we get what I imagine as her entrance upon the scene. What I have in mind for this opening flourish is maybe she's at a party, she's making her grand entrance, and she's expecting everyone to ooh and ah at her presence, and she's very graceful and poised in this entrance, but she sort of undercuts this self-presentation a couple bars later when the orchestra doesn't react the way that she wants them to react. For me, the second entrance is sort of an insistence that people give her due. You come in on a C sharp, the next entrance is a whole step higher on that D sharp. It's jarring to the ear. Now she's sort of forcing the whole elegant, sophisticated persona that she's going for. I might be reading way too much into this, but this is what helps me get through the music of this section. It sort of raises my second framework, so to speak. Look at all the different repetition that Strauss uses throughout this excerpt. There's so many repeated elements, both on a small scale and then also on a big scale, and I think that this opening is a good example of it. You start with the motif, the melody on C sharp. The next time you come in with the same melody with some alterations, a whole step higher, and then a section with a lot of repetitions. This is the bar before rehearsal 23. The levels of repetition are intense here. So you have this figure that's repeated 4 times. Musically, that can be pretty challenging to just play the same thing 4 times in a row. It's worth thinking about what is Pauline doing or thinking or saying in that repetitive moment. And then you get to these repeated F sharps. I think there are 8 of them. There are so many different ways to get through these F sharps. People change strings, they slide, they crescendo, they use all sorts of different articulations. I just think that you have to do what speaks to you. There's certainly a crescendo, certainly it grows to this sort of climactic moment. And I think this is another important essence or element of the Pauline character, is that there's this melodrama building, temper tantrum aspect to it, and right at the climax she backs away. She has this mercurial, schizoid aspect to her reactions in this musical scene. I think that the first half page really sums up the musical problems in this excerpt, and it just shows the sort of decisions that you have to make to get through the whole thing. Another useful idea, thinking of actual words or phrases that would go with certain melodies. I'm going to give an example that I have stolen from Alex Carr, who's concertmaster of Dallas Symphony. He has an excellent video on Heldenleben that goes through in much greater detail than I will attempt to, but I love his idea on the second page, this melody. It starts. He's offered up that this is Pauline saying, "Woe is me, I am a lady," which is funny, and I just like the tongue-in-cheek, self-deprecating aspect of it. This might seem like fairly obvious advice, but knowing the orchestral part is not only a good idea to show that you've done your homework, but it also puts some limits on what is possible or what you should be doing in the excerpt. Obviously, you shouldn't be taking funky time or writs before there's like a Pitts entrance in the strings. So if you know those places where you have to line up, it constricts your musical choices, which I actually really appreciated. Sometimes it can feel like an overabundance of musical options, so finding ways to limit will help you come up with a more specific and sensitive interpretation of this excerpt. Without going through all 6 minutes of this excerpt and talking about all the expressive markings and all the tricky passage work, of which there's a lot, I'd just like to sum up on these more general concepts, thinking of the Pauline character, identifying instances of repetition and finding ways to develop musical ideas through repetition, identifying also Strauss's very idiomatic language, putting this music into an idiom that makes sense. I think that's the most important thing, so that you're presenting a unified product that you have a vision about, you're telling a story about, rather than splicing and dicing a bunch of disparate ideas. When done correctly, this music tells a really compelling story, and it's a huge challenge, but it's really fun to give it a go. So enjoy your storytelling.